Hello, boyos. I'm back to show you some even more Botto stuff.
Back again, huh?
And this video is going to be all about how to explore tournament data. We're going to be looking at 3 Botto commands that will each let you explore tournament data in its own way. So I should probably clarify, what do I mean by tournament data? Now, after every broadcasted match we've ever had, our tourney organizers and volunteers will go through the VOD and jot down every single thing that happened. And it'll usually be in a spreadsheet like this. So they'll get every ban, every force, every selection, even every death and time. So the result is we have all this data from every single tournament we've ever held, which is like 4. But it's getting to be a pretty large data set. So what can we do with that? Well, now that it's all inside of Botto, you can do some pretty exciting things. And that's what we're going to be going over today. Now, before I get into that, there are a couple things that will be going away because what is replacing them is way better. Now, in the past, we had this ELO rating viewer. There's going to be a way better way to look at ELO ratings in this new system, and the profile as well. This was an attempt to do some interesting stuff with stats like King Bean does in his stat viewer, where you can go through each person's, like for instance, their total matches, total races, and then their average deaths per race, and then going into their most chosen tracks and pods. So those are very interesting stats to look at, but within each of these spreadsheets, we're only looking at one tournament's worth of data. What Botto is doing is it's combining all the data from every year that we've had a tournament, and you're getting it all at once. So both of these guys are going away. So what's replacing them and how do I find it? Well, all you have to do is type /, and if you don't know the name of a command, this is very useful because it will pop up a complete list of Botto commands and descriptions for what each of them do. Now we're going to be looking at tourney commands, so we'll type /tourney, and the 3 commands we're looking at today are matches, leaderboards, and stats. Now, let me remind you, you don't have to type this out in a public channel for everyone to see what you're doing. Maybe you don't like people watching you interact with the bot. That's okay. All you have to do is DM Botto and say, "Hey, Botto."
Hey!
And within your direct message with Botto, you can now use those same commands that are available in a server where Botto is found. So what exactly does this allow us to do? Well, it lets us look at the most raw representation of the data that's available in Botto's database. Using this match viewer, we can look at every single match that has ever been recorded, and we can do that in a very accessible and compact way. So the first thing you do is select the tournament of the matches you want to browse. And you can do that using this top select box. Within here, you'll find the name of each tournament, as well as the date range, total number of players, total matches, total races, and total deaths. And that just helps you sort of pick and choose what you want to look at. So let's look at the most recent years as of this recording. And when we click it, you'll notice we get some more links and that same totals that we saw in the description. So if we wanted to, we could click this and go back to visit that spreadsheet that we saw earlier, as well as a YouTube playlist and Maturino and challenge links. Next, we can use the second select box to choose our sort option. So this is going to sort the matches that we will see in a moment here by a certain order that you select. So we have date ascending, oldest to newest date, newest to oldest, number of races. So if you want to see the matches with the most races first, the matches with the most deaths. And then these two options are interesting. The average time difference between the players in a 1v1. So that'll sort of give you a way to gauge the quality of the match, depending on how close the match was. And also the closest race. So it'll just pick whatever the closest race was and show that. And so that way you can easily get like what were the closest races of a tournament and what matches are they found in. So let's just do newest to oldest, and you'll see once we click in here that that is exactly what we have. We start with the grand finals, which was the final match of 2021's tournament, and you see in the description we have the date it was held, the number of races it went to, the total number of deaths between both players, the average time difference between the players, and the closest race for that match. You can scroll through all of these in that order, and unfortunately it's limited to 25 selections total, so I have to sort of paginate it in this way. But you can still get around pretty easily all the way down to the very first match of the tournament. And really, in this order, you would just sort of switch to that sort option to make it easier to do so. So let's go ahead and look at a match. So what happens when we select one of these options is it will display the entirety of that match in a very compact way. You'll see we have the overall metadata for the match. We can click on this main hyperlink to go directly to the VOD here. We can click here for the challenge link. We can see the exact time and date it was held in our time zone. This is the rule set that was used, and these are the commentators. So you'll see under each race we have sort of the bans and conditions that set up the race, and then under each player will be what pod they chose and sort of the results of their run on that race. So you'll see maybe a good example here is race 2, where you see Damaray banning Mars Guo, Ace temp banning Grabvine Gateway, Damaray picking Bunta training course, and then we see the results of those choices under each player. So both players got a personal best here. Damaray was the winner. A more complicated one to look at here is race 9, where you see the temp bans, but also this little repeat icon for Doug Derby. That means it's a run back. So you see that it was already played here, and Damaray is using his run back to play that. And he's also imposing this little asterisk, meaning forces, skips, and no upgrades. And then we see the result of that. Damaray wins. Ace looks like he DNF'd with 2 deaths. Another thing to watch out for is the new record flashing emoji, which will let you know that this is a new tournament record for this match. I should also mention you'll see the notes for the run under the player it pertains to. So Ace here was the one who forfeited on lap 2 with that DNF. Now the benefits of it being in this format is you get the entirety of the match in a very compact way that helps you sort of be able to, at a glance, understand what happened within a match. And that way you can very quickly review it or check what you need to check. Or maybe you're watching along and you just want to remember what happened within a match. It has a very clear order of events, so that should help you sort of understand, especially as a new player. You might want to familiarize yourself with how a match proceeds and at what point do you need to make a ban or selection. And let's say as a player, maybe you'll want to review one of your own matches, or you'll want to study your opponent's matches and see what their decisions were and how it worked out for them. But also you can just use this as a tool to sort of find the most interesting matches of a tournament by using these sort options. So you'll see this grand finals was actually one of the closest matches, which you would hopefully expect. But then after that, you can see what the next closest matches are, and also use the closest race option to see, holy cow, Damaray versus Banana Boat Kid had a race that was 2/100ths apart. So that's pretty crazy to go in there and find. And you can do so. Here it is. Death Row's Revenge. So you can find it, go in and watch it, and maybe for highlights or for nostalgia's sake.
No, both are gonna go for the out of bounds jump.
200ths exactly. Wow.
200ths of a second exact. Oh my god.
You know, we also see here with the flashing new record icon that Damaray set 2 new tourney records during this match. So again, that's the whole point of this, is to quickly show you everything that happened within a match. Okay, that's enough about matches. Now let's talk about the next way we can look at tournament data, and that is through tourney leaderboards. Now this, of course, asks the question, what are the best times for the given track, conditions, or pods? And you can see that happening right here in our first selector, which is the track. And a cool thing it does here is it actually shows you the total number of runs available to look at for each track, as well as how many of the total are skips, no upgrades, and even no upgrade plus skips. That's right, we're breaking barriers here. Then on top of that, we can come in here and set our conditions. So let's get the max upgrade runs out of here. We only want to look at no upgrade runs. Or, well, looks like there aren't any skip runs for this, so we can forego that. And there aren't any qualifying runs. So that's actually an option you need to set here if you want to actually look at qualifying runs. So a helpful indicator here is this number down here, which will show you how many runs you're filtering out. So if you want to make sure that you're looking at all available runs, you will select everything that has a number here. And we can see that obviously the qualifying times were a lot more impressive than any old time you're getting in a race. PBs only. This is another option available to you for filtering out sort of duplicate players and conditions within a leaderboard. So let's say if you turn this off, it would show you that of the top 5 best times, ace is 3 of them. But if we turn that back on, it would then show us the top 5 fastest players, if that makes sense. Now the final option for the condition selector here is filtering out everything except for your own runs. So if you select that, it'll show you only your runs, and then factoring in all these other conditions as well. You can go even deeper than that though by getting into the pods. So by default, with none selected, it will show all the pods, but once you start selecting them, it will just filter those pods. So an interesting way to use this is look at maybe everything except for the top pod, and then you can keep going down from there to see what the 3rd fastest is and what the 4th fastest is, and just keep going down and down. Or maybe you want to see how, 2 pods compare. Looks like slide isn't that great, maybe.
Top
But yeah, that's how that works. I should also mention that you can click on this link to go straight to the VOD. And then this row of information is the pod and the upgrades that were used. And it would also show deaths here. So you can see that was a single death for that run. Oh, look, it's me. And then the conditions for the race. So it was a full track run with a temporary bullseye band. So that would help give some context to the run if you need it. Okay, enough about leaderboards. Now let's get into the third and most exciting feature, which is tourney stats. So what this command does is it allows you to start answering some more interesting questions that you might have about the tournament data, such as what is the most played track? What is the most banned track? What is the track with the most deaths or least deaths? So not only does it allow you to answer those questions, but it allows you to dive in even deeper and understand why these stats are the way they are. So the default state for this stat viewer is it will show you the global stats. That is every single player's stats combined into one. And you'll see the totals we have for everything. And this is an important number to look at. The average deaths per race for every single race ever is 1.9. So that'll help you sort of compare yourself or your potential opponent to this average. Now, before I proceed, I should warn you, there is a lot jam-packed into this thing, so there is going to be a lot to talk about. I'll try to move through it semi-quickly, but there's just a lot in here. Like the match viewer, we have sort of the main option we're filtering by, then the sort options, and then within here, we can see the stats. So the stats don't appear within the message, they appear within the dropdown. So with our current options, which is global stats, sort by plays, when we click here, what do we get? The most played tracks out of all tournament. And surprise, surprise, Aqualair's Classic. If we scroll all the way down, we get the least played track, Howler Gorge. And then underneath each track, you'll see in the description, we have some interesting numbers to talk about. And you can sort by all of these, and even the sort will sort of explain to you what these numbers are. So to explain these quickly, 149, that's the total number of runs. And then you'll see the percentage that makes up of the runs. So for all these percentages, since there are always 25 options, you should compare that to 4%. So 5% is just slightly above average. And then the pick rate there is 4%, so that's completely average. And the ban rate, it's very rarely banned. Now I need to explain what's going on with pick rate and ban rate. With the pick rate stat, it's only calculating when the player who chose the track was actually able to pick the track or the pod. So if that track is banned, it won't count against the pick rate. So same thing with the ban rate option. If the track was already perma-banned, any ban that the player made after that would not count against this ban rate stat. So it accounts for both tracks that have already been played and run back potential. So if a track hasn't been run back yet, technically it's still available to be chosen. So that's something to think about. Next we have our win rate. So you might be looking at these numbers and you're wondering, what exactly is this based on? Because if every race on a track results in a winner and a loser, it should be 50-50 for every single one, right? Well, that would be the case, but it wouldn't be interesting at all. So what this stat actually uses is whoever selected the track, how that turned out for them. So you'll see that for players who pick Abyss, they are actually slightly more likely to win than lose. And then below that, you'll see that it falls off pretty low to the bottom. And And the reason for that, you might be able to guess, is because of the way we have our rule set up, is because the player who loses the last race is the one who gets to pick the next track. So very often that means that whoever the underdog is, or the lesser skilled player, is usually the one on the picking side. So that's why you'll see a lower and lower win rate. The next stat we have is the average deaths per race. So if we sort by that, we'll see that, boom, the Boona Classic is the deadliest track, and I wouldn't doubt it. Followed by Executioner, and actually Zugga Challenge beats out Crabvine and Fire Mountain Rally. So these become some pretty interesting things to talk about in commentary and to factor into your choices and bans. So hopefully you can see just how beneficial this is to your tournament career. And of course, if we scroll all the way down, we see the least deadliest track, no surprise, Montgeza Speedway and the Boonta Training Course. Next up, we have no upgrades, which just sorts by how many runs have done no upgrades on that track. And I'm using that turtle to signify no upgrades. It seemed pretty fitting. Then we have sort by skips, which is using this fast forward icon. You can see that the most skips have been done on Bumpy's Breakers. Next we have game order, which just puts it in the same order that you'd find in the selection menu and alphabetically. So that just helps. Let's say if you're unfamiliar to the game order, this would sort of help you find the track you want to look at a little more easily. Now I haven't popped open the pod stats yet. That's because they're not that interesting, actually. When you look at, obviously, Ben Quadneros has played 51% of the time. Now, if you're unfamiliar with the game and sort of the meta, this might look pretty absurd. But obviously, he's a very overpowered pod. So it actually makes sense that you see these crazy stats with Ben being picked 76% of the time that he is available and 42% of the time that he's available to ban. So you can use those same sort options as they affect both the track stats and the pod stats. So looking at the most picked player, Ben, the most banned player, Ben, the most wins. Oh, it's actually Bossy Baronto. If you're looking for a sure thing, go ahead and use Bossy or Sayunga, because they will definitely let you win. Now, wait a second. This can't be right. Sebulba only has a 71% win rate. Yeah, that's... I gotta fix that. Something's wrong. And then maybe a more interesting sort option is the skips. You can see what pod is used the most in skips. Well, okay, fine. It's Ben, but Mars here is next up with Juan being third. So that's kind of interesting. And then, of course, if you just want to look at them in game order, you can do that. Now, here's an interesting thing. Team Toe has never been played whatsoever in a tournament. And I think someone else here, Odie Mandrell, also never played. So be sure to get on that for next tournament. So until now, we have only looked at the global stats, and we haven't popped this bad boy open yet. That's because this top select is pulling triple duty. So let's go ahead and take a look. What's going on in here? So we'll see that the top option is global stats, but following that, we have something of a leaderboard where it's sorted by ELO rating. And you'll see we have all the way down to 23rd. We can get even lower and see the unranked players as well as non-players, but still participants. So these are just commentators. So under each player, we can see their ELO rating, their total matches, total races, their win rate, their average deaths per race, and the number of matches that they've commentated. So that's what this looks like in its default state. Now, what happens when we click on someone, if you'll ignore what's happening here for a second, when we go back in here, it'll change. So now what do we see? Well, now we have a percentage, and then these numbers, and then now the numbers have changed. So what does this mean? All these stats are now generated in context of the selected player. So what this percentage means is how the ELO rating expects the selected player to perform against each player. So we can expect Metallica to take 25% of the races against Ace, and then over here is the points that they would gain for winning against Ace or losing against Ace. So you can see that they have much more to gain than they have to lose, and that's because of the expected performance. That's just how the ELO rating works, but we're kind of exposing them here to make it more transparent, so it helps you get a better idea of how your ELO rating is impacted. And you can actually see that here where it shows this player's current ELO rating, but also the last change to their ELO rating. Going back into here, we can see the total number of matches that these players have played against each other. So you can see that between Mikey and Metallica, there have been 4 matches and 25 races. And then we have the win rate for Metallica against Mikey, which is 12%. So one thing you can do between the ELO percentage and the win rate is actually compare these to see what the ELO expects them to perform and then how they have actually performed. Then for this next stat, we have the average time difference between their races. So how you make sense of this is it's from the perspective of the player it's under in relation to the selected player. So typically in an Ace versus Metallica match, Ace is trailing by 3.3 seconds, whereas King Beandip is ahead by almost 11 seconds. And then as we scroll down, you can see how that varies between the players. Another stat to talk about is the commentary stat. So this basically just shows you the number of matches you've commentated with them as a co-commentator and the number of matches you've commentated for them when they are a player. So Mikey Burger has not commentated with King Beandip, but he's commentated for him 4 times. So that's how you understand that stat. So within just this select alone, you're seeing so much happening between looking at a player's own stats and then their stats in relation to each other player. But then we haven't got into what you can see down here as far as track stats and pod stats for the player. So we can use these sort options to go, okay, for this player, what is their most picked track? And what is their least picked track? What is their most banned track? Executioner. What is their least banned track? Fireman Rally. Oh, that's interesting. Now, again, you can look at that for the pod stats, but again, they're not that interesting. So what I've done to make it interesting is for these track stats. What happens if you actually click on them? It will switch out the pod stats for the runs. So it will get the top 25 runs for whatever selected track you have. And so then you can dive in even deeper and look at all the runs and get a full context for why the stats are the way they are. So if we look at Spice Mine Run here for Mikey Burger, we'll see that here is his best run. Here's his worst run. And then these little emojis will tell us more about the context for the race. So when we see this little index pointer hand thing, that means that he picked the track, and the crown means that he won. So you'll see very often that is the case for Mikey Burger here on Spice Mine Run. Then the little X here at the end, that shows what the temp band pod was. Now what I haven't talked about yet is the accomplishments. So you'll see that we have the totals here in the top, but then what are all these accomplishments? So what this does is, as you can see, it calls out specific achievements, accomplishments, whatever you want to call them, for the selected player. So you can see that Mike here's a full track record holder on Boonta Training Course, Spice Mine Run, and Brew Coast. And then he's got a pretty nasty 27 race deathless streak. That's something to look out for. As you can see from his average deaths per race, 0.23. He's never lost on these tracks, never died on these tracks. And you can see his final standings in previous tournaments. So the goal of this is to give you a pretty rounded view of the player you're looking at, and even for your own reference. Like if you look at yourself, what you've accomplished, and you can keep track of like, oh, I've never died on this track, I'll try to keep that going, or I want to keep my win streak going type of thing. So I should also mention that these final standing accomplishments will only show up for the top 5 players, and then the record holder accomplishments will only show for the best players. The streaks also have a 5 race minimum, and the never lost and never died also have a 5 race minimum. So that way, if you've only raced once on a track and you didn't die, that really isn't an accomplishment. It's more of an accomplishment when you have gone there several times and you've walked away undefeated or deathless. So I think that's all I'm going to talk about for now about this stuff. I've already gone on way too long, but I hope I've given you guys enough information that it will get you interested in exploring tournament data and sort of diving in and becoming a better player and commentator and spectator. And I really hope this allows you to do that. As always, if you have any suggestions or if you spotted any errors in the tournament data or any of the command stuff, please let me know. I'd love to hear your guys' feedback, and I hope you have fun exploring tournament data.
Get lost! Come back when you got some money!